Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to 90 Proof Wisdom. And as you've probably heard, we are giving away $1,000 to 10 different people. So a total of $10,000 if we can hit 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel by Christmas. So make sure you jump on right now. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends, your family to subscribe. So that way we will be obligated to give away this $10,000. How we're going to do it? We're going to go ahead and we're putting 1,000 subscribers in a hat. We'll set up a CSV file and draw the number of the name, and we'll announce the winners right here on the podcast. So make sure you do it, right? Would you do it? Have you subscribed?
I have.
All right, good.
My wife, too.
He has to, or his paycheck stops. By the way, Spencer Bowen. Spencer Bowen's been running Murphy Ladder for the last couple of years. He's done a pretty good job, but we had to terminate him out of that position. Sorry.
No, I understand.
As a matter of fact, we moved him over to Director of Sales and Marketing. VP of Sales and Marketing for Murphy Door. So Spencer Bowen has a long history of Murphy Door now. You've been here
5 years.
5 years. Crazy.
Really close to 5 years.
Whew, that's your 5-year bonus coming up.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right, a whole box of Swedish
That's
fish.
what I'm talking about.
You know what I mean? So today we've had a pretty interesting last couple months, and I kind of wanted to share a thought process that we've had here. And we had basically an offer for an asset, a real estate asset that we currently hold where Murphy Door in Ogden, Utah is. It was for $10.3 million. I paid $3 million for the property, June 2018, and a $10.3 million offer, which I'm going to walk away from. So I wanted to kind of share and kind of go back and forth on why I'm choosing to walk away from $7.3 million in 3 years of return. Probably stupid, I guess, in some people's eyes. But then there's the other side of what is our end goal? Where do we want to end up? How are we going to get there? And does the money help you get there, or does it actually set you back?
That's what I'm talking with my dad about this. And
in your face, bro. Put that mic in your face.
Okay, Joe. All right, Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Do you want to do the intro real fast?
Yeah. Hey, so real quick, I guess we'll have Ken jump in and tell us. Go ahead and roll the intro for me. Thanks, Ken, for
reminding us. He's bossy, ain't he?
Bossy. We love him.
If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle.
Yeah, this is Houston. We're copying. Everything is go here.
We shall fight on the beaches and in the streets. We shall never surrender.
I'm in it just to rewrite history, cause I'm in the mood to label us the leaders of the new school. This ain't for the radio, can't find this on YouTube. This the type of killing that these critics ain't used to.
You're a group of happy rebels. You've said no to the rules of the game and the regulations of the day. You've said no to the conventional wisdom. You're all originals.
In this day and age, I got time for innovation, time to be creative, time to make the waste of my time on critics.
Anyway, like I mentioned earlier, we're talking about how to make a decision on whether accepting an offer of $10.3 million on a $3 million purchase is the right decision for us right now. And it also, I want to cover, in business in general, when is the right time to accept an offer? And at least in my eyes, I'm probably 100% wrong, but at least I can sleep at night with whatever that decision is.
I was just talking about this with Dad, and he had a conversation with Bo. I know Bo's been on the podcast, and it was interesting when he talks to other financial advisors. He was saying there is no right answer, because what might be really right for Jeremy Barker is going to be really wrong for Spencer Bowen, or vice versa. So I think it's fascinating, but it takes a lot of soul searching, a lot of like what is best for
me.
Yeah.
What's your end goal? What's best for you? What's your end goal? And I think it applies to whether you're getting a job with someone, whether you're starting a business with someone. It applies everywhere, and kind of the thought process. And I think this is the first real time I've had to sit down, because I can't do that very often or very long, and weigh out what this really does. Because let's be honest, it's a life-changing number, right? It's a big, huge number and a huge return. So what I wanted to go through was a little bit of the process on why would we walk away from a $7.3 million in my pocket return before taxes and before commissions. Long story short, the building isn't listed, right? And I had a realtor that's representing this group. It's a REIT out of Washington that called up and said, "Hey, would you be interested in selling your building?" And I said, "No, it's not for sale. It isn't." And he just said, "Would you be interested in taking offers?" I'm like, "Well, I guess everything's for sale as long as it's lucrative enough." And then he said, "What would your number be?" And I didn't know what. I said 11,875,000, random number. And I thought, well, that'd give me FU money, I guess. that would be enough to really laugh all the way to the bank. And he says, oh, you're out of line there. We can come up with a number. And they came back with what, I think it was $9 million was their initial deal. I'm like, yeah, that's not interesting to me. Anyway, long story short, settled in at $10.3 million, right? So we sit there and go, well, okay, that's something that's really interesting. Let's sign a letter of intent and kind of get through the weeds of it. Well, the letter of intent processed, and I'm like, wait, this is real. And then the PSA came through. I'm like, okay, this is real. There was a couple hitches though, right? A couple of the hitches were that we wanted to raise their rent in a year at $1 a square foot, and then they wanted to raise the rent the next year $1 a square foot. My rule was we had to close by the end of the year. That was all I cared about because of a potential capital gains increase. I'm not sure if there's going to be one, but either way, that was kind of my quotations or whatever. Like, this is my parentheses of what I need to work within, and that came together too. And I ran the math, and there's what's called a cap rate, which basically takes your net operating income and multiplies it by a percentage of return for the investor, and they're going to look from 4.5 for a really good tenant up to 8-10% cap rate if they can get it. Well, mine was settling in around 5.6 today, but come the new year, it was going to go up $1, which raised the cap rate to 7%. And so you guys are aware of a cap rate. Again, it's if somebody pays $10 million, they want to make 5.5 to 6 or 7% on their money. So the cap rate is a multiplier of your net operating income, right, from your rental revenue. So the higher the cap rate for an investor, the more money they're making, and the less money the seller's making. So it's kind of confusing. You'd think you'd be driving for a higher cap rate for the buyer. That's what they're looking for. But for the seller, you want a lower cap rate because it's really the divisionary number of your net operating income for the year. Easiest way to say it, I guess. Well, as I ran the numbers and I saw, wait, next year's 7%, and then the next year puts them at an 8 cap, which is not a very good return for the seller. All that aside, there's still $7.3 million, right?
Yeah.
So my next thought process was, what would I do with the money, right? Well, we could take the money, pay the commissions, pay the taxes, pay off the loans, and have a nest egg of cash. And then you'd put it into a long-term investment, lower risk investment like a stock or a bond. That's a low risk, stuff that had proven many years of return on an average basis. And it would basically pay my family $12,000 to $15,000 a month in interest post-tax, which is really a lot of money.
Oh, every month? That's insane.
That's insane.
When we were having these initial conversations, I was like, dude, I would do it 100%. Yeah. With where I'm at in my life, Spencer Bowen would do that deal. But the more and more you talk about it, I'm like, God, okay, that's a really good, reason to not do it. And even going past that, it's like, I'm not educated enough on the stock market to really have that much faith in it. I'm a millennial. I don't know if Kenneth feels the same way here, but I really don't. I don't trust the stock market, even if it's like a super reliable, historically proven, whatever it is. I still would have more faith in real estate. And maybe I'm totally wrong there. Like, I'm not educated at all, but just from my outside view, that's
for your own knowledge. Yeah. So that's kind of what I was thinking. Is we went to Kentucky last week with my family, and I had an opportunity to visit with my wife, and I'm fortunate that my wife doesn't care one way or the other because we're pretty cheap people to be happy. Like, we've learned how to live on no money, and if I had to do it again tomorrow, it'd be okay. So we said, what would we want to do? And she says, well, let's pay off, all our personal debt, and then we could sit scot-free and then make that money. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But, you pull the money out and you have to pay taxes on whatever you pull out. And then you can do what's a 1031 exchange if you want, where you have to buy another property, identify it within 45 days and execute it within 180 days. And I'm not 100% sure on all the days, but
I am. That is true.
That is accurate. Yep. Okay. So I've just listened to other people.
Only because I just literally talked about this with my dad. So that's the only reason I know.
So those are accurate, I guess. And I'm like, well, is there anything I want to buy? And there's a few buildings around here. And the other hitch is I have to buy something that's at least $1 more than I'm selling. I got to tell him that. So that means I have to spend $10.3 million and $1 to do it, which you could do. There's some properties out there, but there's nothing as sexy as it is. So I sat back and I said, hey, wait a second. What does my risk portfolio look like when it comes to my tenants in our properties here? We have 2 other outside tenants and 2 wholly owned entities by us that are leasing from I have a B&D Real Estate LLC that is the landlord that leases back to another one of our companies, right? Or Murphy Door and Murphy Ladder, and then the other 2 outside tenants.
Which is freaking brilliant, by the way. I'm surprised more YouTubers and stuff don't explain this. Like, if you have a business, create a real estate company and then lease that back to yourself. Even like on your personal home, when you were explaining that to me the other day, I'm like, that is how you build what, like, I don't know. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Right.
I'm surprised more people don't really point that out.
Well, like this one, here's the advantages. So I said, what is $7 million minus taxes, minus my payoffs, minus, what does it really shake out to? And then I thought, well, right now, our rent roll, so everybody knows it's your monthly rent revenue is running in the mid 50s, around $55,000 a month. With the step increases they wanted, it would raise it to $61,000 a month, and then $68,000 a month the next year. Right? And your mortgage on a property like this is going to be in the $14,000 to $15,000 range. So your net, is around 45 to 50 grand. And right now it's 35 to 40 grand. As it steps forward, you end up, if you did the same rent increases that your new landlord wants, well, your rent roll is pretty high. And there was some benefit to the rent roll. There's one, I have a friendly landlord for my 2 businesses, right? So you have rent roll that makes you net return. And then I have a friendly landlord, which is myself. So if hits the fan, which you never know, it can, and Murphy Door or Murphy Ladder can't pay the rent, I'm not going to go take all their assets and close their doors and make sure that I get paid my rent roll and sue them for the balance of their lease. But if you go to a REIT, you potentially could, right? So that was a risk that I was trying to avoid. The other one is when you own real estate, there's what's called depreciation. And unfortunately with your house, if you're singularly or owned by you, like Jeremy Barker, I own my personal house. What do I get to write off every year?
Your taxes or your interest,
Your interest expense, right? So if I owned it through a trust or an LLC, I bought the house through this LLC, business and I leased the house to myself, personal rental, even if it's at a loss or even if it's for the payment. Let's just say that. The real estate company that you own can take the depreciation of the asset and you can set up, there's rules inside your depreciation. You need to check with your state, but rather than just the interest, which you can write off, and the depreciation. So with this property here, we get to write off several $100,000 a year in depreciation and several $100,000, well, maybe not several hundred, but $100,000 in interest potentially, right? So now let's say your rental property makes you $300,000, $400,000 a year in rent roll, and your depreciation matches your operating income. You pretty much can write off a lot of it, if not all of it.
All of it, yeah.
If you do it right, right? So I looked at that in the sense of a multiplier, and I said, okay, to get to that $7.3 million, what does that do? And right now we have leases in place with all our tenants to 2027, right? And Murphy Doors 2028. So we're pretty safe for 5 years and 6 years, right? So we know, well, barring any kind of catastrophic events with any of our tenants, that we can count on $3 million in net operating income, right? Well, and then I get the depreciation alongside of it,
that, yep.
which helps me offset the net operating income. And I thought, well, so there was 3 pros on my sheet that I wrote out. There was more than that, but friendly landlord, depreciation of the property, net operating income that helps me build these other assets we've been buying, the lots up in Flaming Gorge, the Convergys asset up in Ogden, and then paying this down and doing the new buildings and remodel and restructure, which all that would that net cash flow would stop. But as we buy other properties, we're getting other assets that we can depreciate. And I know this is probably a lot, but this is just how bad my ADD is in my head.
No, I love it.
So I sat back and said, okay, if we have $4 million in net operating income over the next 5 to 6 years, and I can depreciate almost equivalent amount in tax offset, right? And over that next 5 to 6 years, we will gain, hopefully, barring the real estate barring interest rate, which offsets real estate costs. But as long as the market keeps appreciating, we get to recognize the appreciation in the value of the asset, right? So in my pros and cons column, and I brought Spencer on here today because he's great to banter with. He loves to feed you negative and positive, which is much appreciated.
No, I love it. It's more of an education for me than anything. So
well, at least I can bounce this off someone's head, and I thought people might be interested in how in the Sam hell, Jeremy, are you walking away from almost $7.5 million? In my head, I look at it like that's a plane, that's several Ferraris. I mean, I'm not that guy. But if you want to look at it in a base, it's a huge amount of money,
cash.
Right? So it's been a major struggle in my head on what's the right choice. And so I had to kind of look, what is my objective in this business of mine? Not Murphy Door, Murphy Ladder, but in the real estate holdings companies. What do we want to do? Well, my end goal is to have a lot of them, right? Is to build up over 1 million square feet in rental assets.
Do you care where it's at?
I like to be close, but it isn't required. I think it's just easier to manage. For me at this stage in my real estate investment, I don't know it well enough to go outside markets to know what the economy's doing.
You know what's cool? Not to cut you off, but there's so many YouTube guys out there. I have this many doors. A lot of apartment guys. A lot you got the Grant Cardones out there, but no one has ever been from your position where you're at now. You're just getting started. And if you keep doing these and actually show the progression of the journey and you do get to that 1 million square feet, this will be rad to look back on.
I didn't even plan that.
That would look
But
rad.
that is smart, I guess.
Cool.
It'll be fun. So currently we sit with just under 200,000 square feet. We're just barely shy of it. It's around 193,000 square feet. And
with both properties?
With both properties in total commercial asset.
Yeah.
Right. So we look at it, and we've got another deal we're looking at in Kentucky that's about 197,000 square feet that we're wanting to build out. But that's beside the point. So there's some advice I've been given. If you're a manufacturer, you don't want to own the building you're in because you need to build doors. You sell doors, That's your business, right? And that's Don's opinion. And I appreciate his opinion because he doesn't want diversified focus. Well, Murphy Door doesn't own the real estate. My B&D real estate does.
Yeah.
Right.
That seems so smart to me. I'd want to know.
it's
He's smarter than me.
It's based
so
on focus.
Is that what it was?
It's all on focus. Where do you want to diversify your attention? I totally agree with it. But right now I have really good team members that are handling a lot of the day-to-day operations that give me an opportunity to split my plate a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't recommend doing it if it was day one necessarily.
Yeah.
Might be the right time, depending on how busy you are and what your ability is for the down payment or being able to acquire financing or seller financing or however you go about doing it. It might be the right choice because you're missing days on opportunity to gain the appreciation right off the depreciation. There's a whole lot of stuff we just talked about. But at the end of the day, I'm I can have depreciation. I can have net operating income, which produces the wealth to be able to buy the next piece that I'm looking for. I get the appreciation of the asset over time, right? And I have a friendly landlord, especially where it's an owner-occupied. Well, it's not owner-occupied. Let's just put a related party occupied space.
So on the flip side, what would happen in the next 5 years to make you regret your decision?
Well, obviously, I guess if interest rate goes crazy, which it needs to kind of curb inflation a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It needs to go up. But I don't think it would make me feel bad because if it does hit the fan, then Murphy Door has an insulation layer. And if they have to miss months, and right now they're not in a position that it happens, but we're realists. Stuff does go bad. And there is times that we might have to say, okay, Murphy Door, you can go a few months without paying rent.
Yeah.
It's okay. And that is all right. Now, there's the other argument. Well, you'll have the $7 million in the bank if you had to pay the rent. It's different. Well, here's what's different about it. Is I've paid taxes on the $7.3 million that I'm reloaning back to Murphy Door that could potentially be a bad debt, right? If it's going down the tube.
Yeah.
Right? So you're shuttling cash back of post-tax dollars, right? I didn't like it, really, at the end of the day.
And talking about, because my dad's going through something similar, and we talk about it makes you really think like, okay, what is truly valuable? Because there's a lot of wealthy people moving money here, a lot, and they're all buying assets. They're getting rid of their cash. It's like
wealthy people don't have cash.
Exactly.
So I sit on the board of a big health group, as you know, American Red Cross.
Yeah.
And they did a thing for investors, for fundraising. And what was really interesting, and the guy that did the presentation, I don't think it's not any secret. I think it's public information anyway. But he painted out a picture of how the wealth is that rich people have, and why cash donations is not necessarily the premier focus, and how asset and stocks and bonds and real estate is.
So they give their donations with like stocks and
pre-tax.
Really?
So think about it. You do $100,000 in tax stock or in stock that I donate to you. Mm-hmm. I'm just transferring the stock share to you, but I haven't cashed out the stock and ended up with $65,000 or whatever the dollar is. I don't need accountants texting me saying how dumb I am on my taxes. I don't know what the net is, but whatever it is, let's call it 70,000, even for those guys. Well, now you're giving $100,000, but it's costing you $130,000 because you paid taxes on it. But if they're just to transfer the asset in a donation form, they get the full value of the $100,000, and it doesn't cost them more than that because it's not post-tax dollars. But the status or the statistic that was interesting is only 1 to 2% of the ultra wealthy that they work with is in cash.
Everything else is in assets.
They said the ultra wealthy only hold about 1 to 2% of their wealth in cash.
Wow.
So put that in perspective, if they're worth $100 million, they probably only have about $1 million to $2 million in cash, which is a lot of cash. But if you think about $100 million, that's a lot more. So in a realistic perspective, $100,000, they only have $1,000 in cash, right?
God,
and that's like most Americans, if you think about it. If you have a $100,000 house, $1,000 in cash is quite a bit of cash.
Yeah.
500,000, 5,000, right? The rest is working for you, hopefully, because that's the only way you can really build wealth.
And you hear stories like Elon Musk where he sold both his companies for
crazy money,
and he had to borrow money for rent.
Right,
I'm like, that
has
guy,
no cash.
That guy's ballsy. I love it.
And that was another reason I made the decision that I'm making. By the way, this was last night, so you guys are aware of how close to my heart it is right now. As he said, he wouldn't invest in anything he doesn't control. And I'm not saying I'm 100% that guy either, but right now I'm only 47 years old and I plan on working quite a while.
Young buck.
Well, mid-buck.
Yeah.
Mid-buck, right? Starting on the recession side of my rack, right? My antlers, I guess. Nonetheless, it's a really hard choice, but that paralleling with, hey, we're going to try to build our wealth and we're going to try to build our asset portfolio and keep the money working without cashing out and spending it in stupid places like a watch or a car or something dumb post-tax. If you think about that, there's a lot of other ways to spend the money. Now, here's the other thing that I found quite interesting, and I have to give Grant Cardone credit for this one, is when I sat back and said, what is this building appraised for? Well, as we just found out, it's in the $10 million range currently, at least other people's values. And if you take the cap rate, it's a pretty justifiable value. Well, you can refinance and do a cash out, what they call a cash out refinance, and get 75 to 80% of the value. Well, if I only owe a few $1 million on the asset, that means there's $3.5 to $4 million in accessible cash. And here's what the beautiful part was, thanks to Grant Cardone again, was it's used, as long as you're using it for business purposes, which is all I use my money for anyway, as you guys know, is it's pre-tax, not post-tax. So I can take the $4 million out of my bank loan against my building, go build other business assets, and not have to pay the taxes on it.
And you're not required to use that money in any certain way, right?
It has to be for business.
It does have to be for business?
Yeah, it has to be for business. Well, because if it's personal, you're paying taxes, right?
Right.
So, but a work truck, right? Work trailers, more properties, vacation properties that you're leasing out as Airbnb or to yourself, right? You're paying rent and you have a holding company that's renting it back to whoever. Right. That was a pretty eye-opener for me with Grant Cardone. And I was trying, so you guys know my search, as I was looking for how to handle the tax side. What opportunities are there to minimize my tax liability? And that video came up. And I never thought about that.
You shared that video with me. He's like, I know I'm going to get audited. I know. And he's Grant Cardone's a different personality for sure, but he had a lot of good points.
It was a really good video, and it helped me also put my pen to paper and understand what the pros and cons were to the whole thought process. And I was able to more clearly define it, right?
You know what's weird is I feel like people freak out more about small business, and maybe it's just the perception. People freak out way more when they find out if somebody like Jeremy Barker doesn't pay taxes, what the heck? And then they find like Amazon didn't pay anything.
Right.
Like why do they not freak out over that? And maybe they do.
And by the way, about taxes, I paid almost $100,000 last year in taxes.
Yeah, I'm going to get you
on
out
my
of this.
little bit
Sorry,
of income.
buddy.
No, I did. Like, because I did my taxes all completely wrong. I was using my small CPA that is just a local dude that doesn't do a lot of bigger dollars. And he didn't take advantage of a lot of the stuff. So now we hired a big group, Tanner, to audit our financials internally, as you heard our CFO complain about today.
Every day.
It's like a really bad rectal exam, to put it in foul terms, but she's really frustrated. I'm like, Sandra, you're the one that asked for an audited set of financials for us. And they're finding that, wait a second, you paid too much in taxes for all these depreciation assets that you currently owe and own.
But it's the same thing. And we hadn't talked about this, but Grant Cardone tells a similar story where he goes, it was in December, and he had a significant tax bill, and who knows, whatever it is. And his accountant said, you can't do anything. And then he was able to he talks about buying a jet, I think.
Yeah.
And he was able to write it all off. And that's 100% within the legal wheelhouse. And so why are there some accountants that say that, and there's other ones that are be like, no, you can totally do that?
I think people that are good at their craft, that understand who their customer base is and what they're really dealing with and what are the opportunities to help offset the wealth. And by the way, anytime you're deferring your taxes, you still have to pay them someday, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to cash it out.
Right.
So I don't feel like it's any type of tax avoidance. You're just delaying it, in which if you do your job right, you're growing your wealth. So for the government, it's a benefit for them.
Uncle Sam's making the money right along with you. Yeah.
Right along. It's a benefit for the government. So it's really an investment in the
smart.
deferred taxes. So if you're going to take out $100,000 and your net cash out is, let's say, call it $60,000, or if you left it into your business operations and you can go compound that into another project or another
Yeah, the government's going to 10x their money on you.
Yeah, and you use that and you roll it and you quit taking the money out to go buy personal garbage like clothes and cars and watches, because that capital that you just spent on your $150,000 Tesla or $100,000 Tesla, whatever you're spending on your Tesla or Corvette or Ferrari or Rolex watch or the house that you're overspending for your new business, by the way, is post-tax dollars. So on $100,000, again, it's 60-ish. So you're only able to go buy a $60,000 value, in which if you kept in business would be $100,000 towards your project, which you can then turn to $200,000, right?
Yeah, it could all be working for you. Here's the other side of that.
Yeah.
Because my dad, I keep bringing up my dad because we've literally been having these conversations recently. He's not a guy to buy stuff at all, but he's old school in the sense that it's just cash, everything. He hates owing anybody money, doesn't operate on a line of credit. Like he's straight up his own bank. And thinking about taking cash out, he wants a slush fund, like a safety net. And it's been awesome for me as an education to see someone like that and someone like you. Neither is right or wrong. This is right for John and this is right for Jeremy Barker. And I'm honestly probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But it's been cool to see how it's definitely different for everybody. And
I think if used correctly, cash is okay, right? But it is all post-tax. So you're handicapping yourself out the gate 30 to 40% out the gate of your cash power, right? So like, again, Grant Cardone mentioned, you do have cash.
we're giving him a lot of credit.
Well, he deserves it on this one for at least what I did. And by the way, Grant, if you ever hear this, man, it's hard for me to watch sometimes because you're proud of yourself, and that's okay. I love you for that, but I was able to stay engaged and make some decisions. So I'm saying thanks first, but nonetheless, not that he'd ever watch. Either way, all I'm saying is the way he looked at cash and the way he looked at debt. I think there's a healthy level of debt. If you can find an asset that you can find other people to pay for, like a tenant, And you can have your mortgage covered, and then you can have the appreciation of the asset over time, and then you can roll. Whether there's a right time to sell or wrong time to sell, I think it's all based on what your end goal is. Begin with the end in mind. Is that made no sense to me when I heard it for the first time back when Stephen R. Covey or whoever said it forever a while ago. I was like, how do I figure out what the end is? It's starting to be more clear, but I'm almost at, more than halfway through my life, hopefully, right? But at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, now I kind of know what is my end goal. Well, my end goal looks like I want to have a whole bunch of assets. And some people could say, well, flip that property. And then now you can take that $5-7 million, divide it by 4, because most assets require 25 to 30% down, and then quadruple the building. But currently, remember, this asset that was $3 million a few years ago is now worth 10. So I'm really just going to double, not triple or quadruple. And again, if I'm going to get it for that deal, it's probably going to be unoccupied space with non-secure tenants most of the time, or you're going to pay a premium for it. And I don't look for real estate that's occupied very much, I need something that's a real pig that I can put lipstick on.
And increase the value that way.
And increase the value. So I look for old beat up pigs that I can put some paint on the outside, tear down the big trees as you've just witnessed.
Oh yeah.
Put new lighting up.
Wait, how much could you have gotten for those trees again?
Oh, that's I don't even want to talk about it.
Okay, we don't have to talk about it. Sorry.
So I had 27.
Oh, what kind of trees were they again?
Blue spruce.
Blue spruce.
Big giant pine trees, over 30 foot tall, that I hired a tree service to come and cut down. So we did. And then just after that, there's a couple places up in Park City that require a minimum of 8-inch trunks and a minimum height. And the landscaper that happened to stop by and ask me about the trees that I'd cut down, said they pay $40,000 a piece.
Oh, dude.
So I basically ran $1 million through the shredder. Yeah. That's why I said,
but let's not talk about it.
Let's not talk about it. So it was another learning lesson. And to me, I was a little frustrated with the tree cutter guy. Like, why wouldn't you be selling trees, dude? Why are you cutting trees down? Buy a spade, sell trees.
There's probably not that many people that know. Obviously not.
Obviously not. Like, he shredded up the money for me. Like, wouldn't you be like, hey, dude, I'll just give you $10,000 for the trees and I'll shred the money for you off site.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Right. Anyway, neither here nor there. So I take down the big trees so it doesn't look like such an old property. Reskin it, clean the windows or change the windows if you need to.
Looks good.
Put new drywall on or refinish the drywall, new paint, new light switches, new LED lighting, new flooring. As far as the customer is concerned, you have new fresh landscaping, new lipstick and new paint on the outside. It truly looks like a new building on the outside. You walk in, it feels current, it feels up to speed. There's nowhere that looks old. From ceiling tiles to the flooring is all either refinished or replaced. So to go through that deal, we're bouncing all over the place.
Sorry, I'm like the worst guy to do this with.
No, I love it.
I'll bounce right there with you.
So that one's another 100,000 square foot-ish property with just I think that one's 5.44 acres on that one side, and there's another 5 on the other side. The property was being sold for just about $3 million. And it stepped down. It was several $1 million.
Wasn't it on the market for like
4 years?
Surprising that it was on there that long.
Well, it was a pig, right? It had landlock issues. It had all sorts of issues that people that are looking for a quick turn don't have the time. They need to get it occupied. They need to get people moved in so they can pay their payment. For me, we have a little bit of a nest egg that we can use. We acquired the property. It was a $3 million building. We got them down to $2.9 million. Not a big step down. Well, we went in-house, hired our people to do the demo. We hired our people to do the paint. We hired our people to do the tree removal. And when I say our people, I mean our friends that have businesses in that realm. We'll have another, by the time it's done, I'll probably be in the total project around $3.5 million. My first tenant is an Air Force-based contractor that is paying
safe.
double my mortgage payment. Right? So they'll be moving in. They're taking around 20,000 square feet of the property.
So how much is left over after how much more open space do you have to lease?
80,000 square feet.
Holy.
At an average rent revenue of around 75 cents for the lower grade warehousing pieces to $1.25 and $1.50 for the office update per square foot. So at the end of the deal, the way this looks fully occupied is that asset's worth anywhere from $15.5 to $17 million. and we'll be into it 3.5.
You're 2 for 2. I feel like these never ever come along. Like how?
But they do. They're out there.
Yeah.
Right? The opportunities.
How do you
are there.
find them?
Do stuff. Be
Don't
willing to do
say it.
stuff.
Don't say it.
I'm going to tell everybody. Do stuff other people don't want to do.
Yeah.
You just have to do what other people don't want to do. Like work 24-hour days.
Yeah.
Right? Not hard for fire guy to do 24-hour shifts. We do 48s.
Yeah.
Like if you had to put in the time, you have to put in the time. Look past the frickin' pig. If you look at a building, all it is dilapidated paint, floors with cat and mouse all over it, like that place had. It's been empty for 4 years, guys. Homeless people moving in. It was a horrific sight to walk through initially. Like, it was gross.
So if you're me, how would you go about buying your first commercial property?
That's a good question, huh? So
I'm legit asking, and I'm right after this, I'm going to ask you to be my first investor in that property with me. So buckle up.
Oh, well, we'll get ready for the ride. So here's what makes it easier and what facilitates your opportunity to get a loan.
Okay.
You have to have a tenant.
How would I get a tenant? I guess they have tenant field stuff all the time.
You can find tenant field stuff, or you have Bowen Enterprises. I guess that's your family name, but you can have Bowen LLC, have a business that buys the building. Excuse me, your LLC is going to buy the building, but you have another company that's going to lease the building from you.
But what if I don't have that company to lease from me?
It's harder, right? So then you have to find friends, families, and fools and borrow the money and kind of like our first step, right? Because you're required to come up with $550,000 on this type of project.
What is the minimum? Is it 20%? Was it 20% down?
25% typically. You're going to be 25 to 30% down. Typically, you can get down into the 15% on SBAs, but most of the time, by the time you shake through the weeds of what they're really requiring with your loan costs, your appraisals, your environmentals, and your ALTA surveys, which, by the way, all sounds confusing and difficult to do, but it's everyday stuff for people that do it. So you can find people that do all the above requests without much difficulty.
Would I be able to, so in order to find somebody to lease from me, before I've closed on the building, can I do that? Can I market the property?
If the selling agent is willing to let you do it. If you put it under LOI and you say, hey, while this is under my letter of intent, do you mind if I start trying to market for some of this space?
Why would they not do that? It seems like that.
They usually do. I haven't had a no.
Oh, okay.
Right? So I even asked the last property we bought, the Convergence property, if I could start marketing lease for before I even closed. So we had our Air Force contractor in agreements before I'd closed on the property by a couple months.
How common is that? Or is that uncommon?
I don't know. I did it because I needed to.
See, that's
right?
awesome.
I'm like, how am I going to create something? Right? So then it would give more weapon or more armory for the bank, But also Murphy Door is going to occupy 51% of the property over there.
Right.
So that really does help where you have a company that can be your occupant and your what they call lead tenant.
So if you didn't have that, would you have been able to still secure the financing?
Not through the SBA and not for low interest, right?
Oh, okay.
Because it's an SBA loan, at the one that we're doing over there. If we weren't going to be a 51%.
So you would have been able to, but it would have cost you more money up front.
Higher interest, higher closing percentages, and you could go to a more standardized loan or more hard money lenders, which there's a lot of. I didn't know. You hear about hard money all the time. There's a lot of them that do it. They're willing to do short-term loans for a couple of years, and your rates are going to run from 8% up, which don't let that be discouraging. That's a pretty normal interest rate in the past, right? Yeah. 8% isn't the end of the world. If you see like low-hanging fruit and some real opportunity in the asset. If you go over to this building, and there was one up in Ogden that I saw, it was 12,000 square feet, and they were asking $400,000, right? So with 20% down, you'd need $100,000. And a lot of people, especially now, post this real estate boom, have $100,000 in equity in their home, right? Mm-hmm. So that 25% deposit isn't going to be too difficult. The next thing that's going to be difficult is how are you going to repay the debt? That's what bankers look at. But hard money lenders aren't necessarily looking at that.
They're looking at the collateral.
What are they looking at? They're looking at collateral. How's the price per square foot? Well, that particular property was like $40, sub $40 a square foot, which was great. And by the way, it was a block building with a great roof. but there was no tenant, and it was ugly on the outside. It was a hideous building on the inside too. It was filthy. The floors were filthy. The walls were just filthy, and the lighting was bad, and the paint was
Was it
hideous.
a single unit or was it multiple?
It was a single tenant use before. I think it was like a Napa Auto Parts.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. So anyway, I should have acted faster, but anyway, that one, 100 grand down would have got you into the building. You're going to have, on a small building like that, don't let them throw big numbers at you. You got to get paint yourself, and you got to get a sprayer for $1,000 yourself, and you got some window cleaner, and you got some electricians you may have to pay because it's commercial. You're going to have to hire the professional fields out like plumbers, heating, air, and electrical, all the mechanical trades. Find bids, get people that are active. And then, by the way, there's programs that'll help you, like WattSmart, that'll help you get LED upgrades for old buildings so you're using less consumption of power. So they'll pay anywhere from 40 to 75% of your upgrade.
Wow.
So, you can get in there and change the lighting out for just a small amount of money. So if you say, I'm going to put 100 grand down and I need another 100,000 in repairs, which is far too much for a building that big, I would say you could do it for 40 to 50 grand. And you have to go out and work though. Pull the trees out, rent a skid steer. Do I still do that every day?
Yeah. You clean it out yourself. Yeah.
I do it myself. Just like the residence we built up in Flaming Gorge. I did a lot of it. It doesn't bother me to get out there and work. And it's not because you can't afford to do it, but if you can afford the time, it just changes your margin on the end. Sure, you can just pay people to do it all. And I love people's mindsets like, I just hire it all out. If you can, and if your time, by the way, that quote from Warren Buffett, my time's worth more than that. And his response is, your time's only worth what you're getting paid. So if you've got TV time from 5 o'clock to midnight,
So are you getting, yeah.
you're not making any money. Your time's not worth anything. And then the response is, well, yeah, for me to get off the couch, I better make at least $300 an hour. I had a guy tell me that the other day.
Isn't that what I told you before I got hired?
Yeah. No, but I had a guy say that. He goes, dude, I'm not getting off the couch for less than $300 an hour.
Really?
I'm like, coming from a guy that's broke.
Really?
Oh my gosh.
Maybe that's why.
Right? I'm like, dude, you have nothing. He's like, my time's worth way more than that. I've decided that if I don't get off, I'm not getting off the couch for less than $300 an hour.
Wow.
Like an hour?
What does he do?
I don't know. I know that he doesn't have much. Bless his heart.
We need him on the podcast. We need to figure out what he's doing.
Well, where his mind has decided he's worth $300 an hour.
So going back to this, if you were me, would you?
Oh, you want a building right now?
I'm straight up. We're gonna do this. I think you think I'm joking. I'm not.
Okay.
Would you look at more? Would having just a single unit deter you? Because I've looked at the properties we've done so far with that you've done, and
multi-tenant.
Having multi is like awesome.
So take that 12,000 square feet and look at it in a couple different lenses, right? So 12,000 square feet.
You're talking the 12,000.
This Napa. I'm going to use this example on what that true value is and how to come up with it.
Okay.
In my redneck fashion. You guys, you can correct me and tell me all sorts of stuff. Please do. I'm not above it. I'm willing to learn. That's how you get there. But I'm just going to show you what I've done. And whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent.
Really well.
It's worked really well. Right now we're sitting on a pretty decent amount. I guess in 3 years, fully occupied space of around $25 to $30 million in real estate.
Crazy.
And guess how much cash I have in out of my pocket?
How much?
$250,000 out of my own hard pocket. So when you look at the return on investment, it's based on what?
Yeah.
What
Cash.
you bought the building and what you sold it for, or based on how much money you put into the project and what you sold it for?
Cash.
Cash on cash, or money on money, right? So, and there's ways we can talk about how I got there. So we'll use that kind of in your forefront. So this 12,000 square foot building, they're asking $400,000.
Okay.
So that puts the square footage at $33 a square foot, right? So that includes the property it sits on. It was like an acre, right? So you're paying $33 a square foot. Can you build anything for $33 a square foot?
Nowhere near it.
Nowhere near. So then you've got footings, foundation, plumbing, block, roofing, trusses, all the above, heating and air conditioning, electrical, all the things that go in the project. So you're coming in really well right now, right? Especially a block building. They last way longer than a metal building, and there's just some benefits to it. And ultimately what you're really buying is this shell. So you could look at it depending on your zoning. Can you have multi-tenant?
That's commercial. That would be commercial.
So you could have multi-tenant, right? That wouldn't matter. So you could say, hey, do I have a good long-term tenant? Well, if Napa Auto Parts came back and said, I'll lease that building for you for 10 years, then that's a pretty solid tenant. I wouldn't have any opposition to someone like Napa taking the whole building, right? So you're going to get, in a standalone building, probably $90 to $1 a square foot a month, right? 90 cents to $1 a square foot.
And that would be office and is that?
Well, no, because it's a standalone building.
Okay. So
So let's just make it easy math and call it $1. Your income on that is going to be $144,000 a year. And then what you do with that $144,000 a year in income is you take that and divide it by an average cap rate. And I'm going to use a high one so people don't beat me up. Let's call it 6%. And that's not really high, but it's a pretty average one. So $144,000 in annual rent revenue divided by 0.06 puts a building value of $2.4 million.
wow.
Fully occupied, right?
Wow.
That's at a 6 cap. Go to 7 cap, it's going to be 1 point something. But needless to say, let's go to a 7 cap. 2 million, an 8 cap, 1.8 million. So again, this is a property that was $400,000, put $100,000 in repairs into it, tearing the landscaping, putting new, fresh, young landscaping in. Some people love big trees. It doesn't sit well when you walk up to a building. It feels like an old building that's been remodeled. If you can get new, young landscaping, and by the way, this comes from Turner Properties out of Kentucky that told me, look, tear out all those big trees. It makes it look like an older building. And if you look at our properties now in Kentucky, it all looks fresh and new. After they bought it, they tore out all the big trees, and it's really made it feel like a new building again. So exactly what they said. So I just kind of followed Ron Turner and Troy Turner's methodology. So you come in, tear out that landscaping. If you have to tear out some of the broken concrete, tear it out, patch it up, reseal the asphalt and put some stripes down. And on that side's property, you're going to be like 10 grand at the most. Paint's going to cost you $5,000 plus your time in material, maybe $8,000. That's going heavy. And then your drywall patching, you're going to have to YouTube how to do it, but then that's not going to cost you anything because drywall mud's free. It's just the grossness of showers that you have to take after doing all that sanding. And then you just hire your plumber and your electrician and go buy some vanities at Home Depot. I mean, you have to get outside the box. And then at the end of the day, you can go out there and how aggressive can you get? How aggressive could you lease that? Okay, now you're stuck with the building that's unoccupied. How do you get it rented? Well, you can take the first rent rate.
How long do you typically have until your first payment's due? Or is that
30 days.
Oh, it is 30 days?
It's like so whatever it is at the first of the next month. So it's going to be 30 to 50 days, right? And then you have to really calculate that. What's my mortgage? How much time do I have without it, right? And this is where hard money comes in.
Yeah.
They won't care, really. They might require a little more down, but if you're willing to put $100,000 or $125,000 down, they're going to look at it and say, okay, I'm getting a building that's $33 a square foot at your price, and then you're going to give me $125,000 down or $100,000 down on $400,000. So really, I'm getting 25% off at that price. So I'm getting it for $25 a foot. They don't care if you pay the payment or not. They don't want to deal with the building, but they're walking into a good deal, right?
Yeah.
Just like when I got this building loan, we got it for such a good deal. The banker that I was using just said, don't pay the payment if you don't want to. We don't care. Because this is a great deal, right? And I'm sure it was in jest.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know that there's some seriousness to it. And remember, they're just in the banking business anyway.
Yeah.
They want your property. They want money. They don't want your property, I should say.
Right.
But if it makes them more money, they want to make income, right? So back to yours. How would you do it? Well, obviously, you'd have to look for hard money because you don't have a business backer. You'd have to look at the right real estate that has traffic.
Wait a second. I do have a business backer.
Well, I meant to say a business.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
I'm not renting the property is what I'm trying to say.
We're going to do a follow-up on this.
Well, I'm just saying you don't have a business entity that's going to be taking the rent place. And that makes it more difficult for everyone.
Yeah.
But let's say you're a small business and change it. Let's say you do have Spencer LLC and then you have Bowen Real Estate Holdings. Bowen Real Estate Holdings would be the purchaser. Spencer LLC would be the tenant.
Right.
You'd go to the bank with, hey, I have a tenant, which is Spencer LLC, and my real estate holding company is going to buy this property and we're going to rent it.
And you have to disclose that, right?
You do, because they need to know who the tenant is.
Right.
And especially if it's SBA, and you're going to say, look, they're going to ask for Spencer LLC to guarantee the loan with Bowen Real Estate Holdings, right? And so both of them are on the hook, but Bowen Real Estate Holdings is getting the credit history on your first deal.
Okay.
Right? So now you have a tenant that's going to be able to pay the mortgage. And by the way, the rent can't be more, generally speaking, your rent payment can't be more than your payment, according to the SBA docs.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So your payment is matching your rent, or your rent matches your
Mortgage payment.
And remember, you have to have at least 51% of the occupancies.
Is that only for SBAs? Because I feel like
SBAs.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but they're easiest to get, right? And they were doing some pretty good benefits and using them up into September, where they wouldn't charge you your closing costs and all these other things, which is a huge benefit. And then 3 months of up to $9,000 a month in your payment.
Wow.
So you did another $27,000. But in this one, now you have 49% of your property available, because Spencer LLC has to rent 51%. So in this 12,000 square foot building,
you would literally just wall off half
6,600 square feet would be Spencer LLC. Now you have 5,400 square feet that you're renting at 90 cents a foot, maybe, or 75 cents a foot even. Let's use 75 cents for a lower rent rate. And you'd take that 5,400 square feet by 75 cents, and now you've got $4,000 a month. Well, what's your payment on $400,000? Well, $300,000 mortgage.
It would be less than probably less than what would it be? $1,200 maybe.
So what's your ROI on your $1,200?
Doing great.
It's 3x.
And
what is Spencer LLC's rent payment? 0. Right. Of course, you're going to have Spencer LLC pay it.
Right.
Right.
But worst case, it's like
I'm
the kind landlord, like you were talking before.
Right. You're the kind landlord if you have to. And by the way, then your real estate holding company potentially could write off your non-payment.
So does Spencer LLC have the ability to sublease?
Depending on your agreement. But if with an SBA agreement, typically not. Right. Typically not. I'm just speaking because I don't know I have attorneys that tell me what I can't. And right now our agreement is that we can't.
Yeah. It seems like these rules change all the time too.
Yeah. And it depends on how aggressive they are at researching. And I would just play it by the rules, so that way you're not, I don't like to lose sleep at night.
Yeah.
Anyway, right? So anyway, that's been a really interesting opportunity. And how do you say no to these incomes? So like you're saying here, now you show a rent that you're paying 75 cents a square foot too, and both of you guys are paying 75 cents. So you have 75 cents times 12,000 square feet. What's your math? It's going to be like $85,000 a year at that 75 cent rate. Now you can say, hey, I want to sell this building at a 6 cap. So I have 75 cents times 12,000 is 9,000 a month, times 12 is $108,000 a year. Divide that by your cap rate that we just talked about. It's a $1.8 million building to a REIT, or groups that are investors and looking for occupied space. And then when you do that, then it sells. You, as long as it's in your lease agreement that you can sublet.
Then you can.
Then you sublet out your space and you're out. And you just picked up $1.3 million, and it can be as little as 90. Well, they want stabilized properties is what they call it. So around 24 months of proven rent roll. Well, that's a pretty good return. And what would let's say you were at 125 grand. What is your net return on your investment? Did you just take a $400,000 property and sell it for did I say 1.8?
Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah, 1.8 million. So people will say 4.25. That's not true. You put $100,000 in plus repairs, so 150. And you turned it into 1.4 million of net at the end of the day. So you almost 10x'd. Way to go, Grant. Another 10x game. Just teasing.
It's weird. Like all these things like seem too good to be true, but people do it.
So look, what was my multiplier? I put $50K of my pocket onto this project. Went to hard money, did a 3-year loan at, by the way, 12% interest. So I pay him $5,000 a month, which by the way, he never cashes. He cashes, but it takes him months to cash these stupid checks. Mm-hmm. So I pay him $5,000 a month in interest. He gave me 500 grand. I put 50 in. He put 500 in. He's a debtor only, like a bank. He gets his interest payments.
He's making great money.
And he doesn't want to close. Like I was supposed to pay him off and he had an opportunity to extend for a year. And he said, no, I'll take it. I just want to extend because I just keep making my interest. It's fine. It's paying way better than any other investment he could find, right? So he's a winner, and he's a great banker for me, and especially at the time where he couldn't find the money.
Speaking of that, like he couldn't find a better place to put his money. Going back to like, should you sell versus should you not sell? If you had to find another deal, you could always find another deal, but find it within 45 days. And to close within 180, that seems almost impossible.
It's really hard. You have to identify it and then close, right? Closing you can do. Identifying it's hard. And to get an LOI out there and then get it accepted, because 1031s, sellers don't necessarily want 1031 exchanges because they explode, just like this one. Mm-hmm. So they've had to go. I would have had to go out, identify. They're on the middle of a 1031 exchange.
So they're trying to find a vehicle for their.
So it's going to hose them up, right? It's going to hose them up.
It's too bad. That guy was cool. They were nice guys.
Well, I'm not saying anything bad about the person.
No, I know.
Like I'm not saying I wouldn't want to work with those people. It's I have to look at what's best for me.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? I just have to say what is best for me and my family and my objectives. And believe me, that's a huge carrot.
Oh yeah.
That's a huge life-changing carrot. So the basis was $10.3 million, purchase price of $3 million, $7.3 million return on your investment, right? And then the basis of the decision-making behind it. So my bullet points were simple. Really came down to friendly landlord, right? Depreciation, commitment of lease for me till 2028, from all my tenants to 2027 at least. The appreciation value from now till then, right? That comes in, and then my depreciation opportunity to write off the depreciating asset and interest in between. So the net gain of $7 million, what would it have taken to get it to where you would have said yes? So what you would have to look at and say, okay, what is that insulation? There is a yes there. But I think at the end of the day, if my depreciation couldn't catch up with my tax offset, that my appreciation over the next period, which is not fair to the investor, right, was being kind of respected and appreciated in the purchase price. And then also basically a deal that's too good to walk away from, that there wasn't like 6 one way, half a dozen the other. So the number, I did do this, just so you know, yesterday, and the purchase price I would need is 12.9.
That would have been like, okay, we're doing this.
Done. And so that's $2.6 million more dollars, which is which can be realized if we would have stepped through their price increase on year 2, right? It can be realized there, and that's what it would have raised, or that was what the evaluation would have been at if we would have used the same cap rate on year 2 instead of year 1. Keeping in mind I have 7 years of rent with them, right? So they're using and capturing it in 2022. If I would have been able to get that cap rate off the basis of rentals on the forecasted rental rate increases, so of the dollar a square foot they're looking for in Murphy ladder and Murphy door tenant, then I would have said, okay, 12.9, that's an extra $2.6 million. The depreciation of savings over this period is not going to be enough. The appreciation's close to that. And it gives you an extra 25% more on your savings, which in turn makes it so you're, instead of making $12,000 to $15,000 a month, you're making closer to $22,000 a month, which you can live on. You can live on 12 easy.
We could rough it.
You could rough it, right? I mean, you can get through it. And the bottom line is you already are understanding and appreciating all the benefits of owning the property. What would it be that you have that as well or better? So right now it's just as well. So for me, it'd be just as well as it is today. But next year, it would be a better benefit for me to be owning rather than renting because of the cost that it has in my other businesses. Right. So just add 2.6 million to the purchase price, guys, and we can have a conversation.
Maybe he'll call you out.
I'm sorry, you guys, if that got to be a little bit outside of our normal podcast, but there's been a ton of my friends, like even yesterday when I was doing the captain's interview at the fire station, asking, how the heck do you do it?
I know. Honestly, that's why, like I said, I didn't mean to railroad that at all, but like for my personal education, like I truly, like I'm going to shop deals. I will shop deals, and I'm going to bring you a deal. Like, hey, how would you do this? Whether you're involved or not, I'm still going to say, okay, I want to do this. How would you do it? So
How would I do it?
It's
And
helpful. It's helpful.
Keep in mind, I'm a scrappy guy.
I know.
I have to do it in the sense I look at it like, okay, what can I do? So I've done a lot of construction in my life. So that gives
you
me
have
a
that
unique
experience.
opportunity to where, and now again, contractors, the guys that are looking for their second opportunity, the reason I don't play in residential is every single Tom, Dick, and Harry on the planet is a residential investor. Everybody. My competition is 90% of all real estate holding people. And there is money there. I'm not saying there isn't. I don't like that competitive of a field. When I look at the commercial real estate in our area, which now is rated number 3 in highest appreciation in the nation.
That's crazy.
Right? Ogden and Salt Lake's number 1. I just saw number 1 on residential build-outs for next year. We are in a unique position where we're kind of like San Diego. We're built between a mountain and a lake, and there's only so much real estate. So the only thing we can really do is pay more money for our real estate. Well, when you're holding a lot of it, you can act. But I want to play in something I understand. And honestly, a block commercial building, it seems commercial scary. Dude, you got a floor, you got block walls, and you got a roof. Does the roof leak? Does the plumbing leak? Does the sprinklers leak? And if they do, it's not the end of the world. When I say sprinklers, I mean fire sprinklers. And then how's your wall condition? Is it paintable? Can you make it look sexy? Sure. You're really looking at 4 walls, a roof, and a floor. The rest of the skin doesn't matter. You can fix that to be as current as possible. It's probably even easier than a house. Houses have multi-floors, wood joists, all sorts of stuff that you could have leaked through in the wood. Commercial is a concrete building, right? You think about that, it's pretty exposed bones. And in the ceilings, typically they're drop ceilings. So you can move the tile and look, right?
That's awesome.
So I play in the commercial world just because it's something that's even easier than residential and it's less competitive. It is I would say it's a little bit different to get a loan, but I wouldn't say it's any more difficult to get the loan, right? As long as you understand how your payment's going to be addressed.
Yep.
That's all. You just have to figure out who's your tenant. Is it you? Great. Can you have an entity that can pay the payment and feasibly do it? Fine. And then if not, reach out to your hard money lenders that are out there, a ton of them. That'll do it for fairly, 8% is a friendly interest rate for hard money. 8 to 10%, still not bad. People think I'm crazy because the banks are lending for 2.75 and 3%. But this is a fault zero world from the feds.
Yeah.
So we have to look at how does a business succeed in an increasing interest rate. And by the way, most of the time they're adjustable interests. They're not fixed most of the time, not all the time. So anyway, I hope that helps somebody. And
if anything, if no one literally sees this, it helped me. So I'm excited.
Good. Well, you should be. There's some really low-hanging fruit out there, and there's some really good opportunities. Don't look at the pretty buildings that turn you on when you see them. Look at the ones that are gross that nobody's going to look at. Look at the ones that your square footage rate isn't $100 a square foot, because there's commercial properties out there. Right now, I just bought Convergys for $25 or $26 a square foot or something with acreage, right? Because in commercial, they're not giving you value to the acreage. That's one thing that sucks. Most of the time. I mean, they're looking at your square footage of the building and who's the tenant. Like that's another thing I wanted to just point out really quick. When a bank appraises a building that's empty, they use comparisons, right? What are the comparable buildings around going for that are empty? But when you're selling or refinancing a bank that's occupied, especially a standard bank will look at non-owner occupied saying, hey, look, I have this commercial real estate and it's all occupied and this is my rent revenue. They look at it like a business, and then they're financing the cap. They're financing your net operating income. They're like, look, okay, so this same building empty was worth, we'll call it $4.5 million, but fully occupied, 10, 11 million bucks. Fully occupied because you have a rent roll here, and there's a value to the business of the rent. So you're selling an occupied commercial structure like you're selling a good, well-operated business that produces $500,000 a year in net income. So the easiest way to understand that is they're looking at it as a multiplier of net operating income, plus backed with an asset of the building. And then they're offsetting the risk portfolio with your outside tenants, saying if you default, I still have these other people that will pay my portfolio. And those are called estoppel agreements, where they sign over the rent to the bank if you default. Right? So it's a really cool world, and it's very unpopulated, and there's some really good low-hanging fruit. Look for the pigs. Look for the ugly ones that people aren't looking at. You're like, oh, dude, that's disgusting. And then you just envision it without the trees, with new paint, with this. Can you strip it down, reasonably strip it down? Is the mechanical sound, even if it's not, is it fixable? If it's not fixable, how much is it to replace? Anyway, thanks for listening, you guys. I really appreciate it. I know this is off our normal piece of, what's good, what's bad. This is just something I've been struggling with for the last little bit, coming to a peace of mind with walking away from that much money and that big of opportunity, because I felt like it was a risk, and it is a risk, and it's a hard decision, just like other decisions we make. And I thought it should be documented, at least for my own sake. So when I look back, I can say, you were so stupid. Seriously. Or good job, that was the right move.
Yep.
Either way, the follow-up will be a win either way. Because guess what I come with? It comes with a lesson, one way or the other, depending on however it shakes out. It's easy to say today, but at the end of the day, you'll win either way, because you'll learn something from it. So thanks for listening, you guys. Don't forget to subscribe. Again, Spencer, thanks for visiting with us. You can find him at Murphy Door selling it. He better be selling a lot of it. But
I thought you were going to say you can find him on OnlyFans. I was like,
yeah, right. Yeah, no. So don't forget to subscribe today. Please like us. Tell us what you liked, what you don't like. If you're a banker, an IRS agent, an auditor, tell us in your comments. I mean, again, if I did math wrong, you can tell me. It probably did. I don't mind doing math wrong. But I'm just using my basis of simple calculations on how we evaluate decisions in business. And I thought this was a good one to review. So thanks again for listening, you guys. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends, because we still have this $10,000 challenge. 10 people, $1,000 by Christmas. Need 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Our podcasts are heard everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to Buzzsprouts to Pandora, you name it. So you can listen anywhere you want. Thanks again for listening. Let us know what you'd like and what you wouldn't like. Thanks. Bye. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to 90 Proof Wisdom Podcast. Hopefully there was a takeaway for you. If you like what we're doing or even our efforts, tell your friends about it. Let us know what we could do better. Again, thank you for listening to 90 Proof Wisdom Podcast. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.